We like to talk about the confidence gap as opposed, in a sense, to the skills gap, because there's so many nuances here. Organizations, they lack the confidence to move forward. I also think we have in a confidence gap, people entering into the profession kind of don't know where to start. So there are a lot of issues when it comes to the gaps that we're seeing. So you could talk about the skills gap, you could talk about a confidence gap. We have diversity gaps.
That was James Stanger, Chief Technology Evangelist at CompTIA. And for the uninitiated, CompTIA is the world's leading non-profit provider of vendor-neutral IT certifications, and he's widely respected for levelling the playing field by providing essential IT skills to people of all levels of expertise. And James is a recognised authority in several crucial tech areas such as security analytics, penetration testing, open source, and so much more. And he's even consulted for global organisations from NTT in Japan to Dell to SoftBank and Microsoft, and also chairs the C3, which is a consortium of leading cybersecurity certifications. So I'll be inviting him on the podcast today to learn about all this and help enrich all our understanding of the fast-evolving tech landscape, from cybersecurity to workforce deployment. So no matter where you're listening in the world, I'm going to ask you to buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Seattle, where today's guest is waiting to speak with us. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is James Stanger. I live in Seattle, Washington. You probably tell by the accent a bit. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist for CompTIA, and my job is to talk to CIOs, CISOs, IT leaders, and talk to them about what their successes are, what those struggles are, and to basically discuss, what we do at CompTIA, which is we represent the IT industry.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And despite there being many thousands of miles between us today, I think here in the UK and over there in the US and everywhere people are listening all over the world, there's one common problem we're all sharing at the moment, and that is this widening cybersecurity skills gap. So I've got to ask, from what you're seeing here, how is this affecting businesses, particularly in terms of vulnerability and competitiveness, and what immediate or long-term solutions do you propose to remedy this? Because it is a huge problem right now, isn't it?
It's a lot of problem. There are a lot of nuances to it. I like to follow our CEO's lead. His name is Todd Thibodeau. And we like to talk about the confidence gap as opposed, in a sense, to the skills gap, because there's so many nuances here. Organizations, to kind of to your point, they lack the confidence to move forward in a lot of ways. And that's the main issue here. And I also think we have in a confidence gap, people entering into the profession kind of don't know where to start. So there are a lot of issues when it comes to the gaps that we're seeing. So you could talk about the skills gap, you could talk about a confidence gap. We have diversity gaps. There are a lot of gaps involved here. There's not just one.
And I think that's a side of the argument that we don't hear enough. And I think, obviously, that one of the good things, I think, is we're starting to attract people from different walks of life into the world of cybersecurity, and not necessarily people from the tech industry. People are retraining now, and you don't need a college degree by that often. Yeah, I think there's a bigger importance now on certifications, and certifications is something that CompTIA is a leading provider of for some time now. So I'm curious, I know you might be biased a little, but how do you see these certifications evolving in the landscape of cloud computing, AI and cybersecurity, and the list goes on? And what's the business value that these certifications to offer to individuals and organizations alike? Because the entry level in some ways has been lowered, hasn't it?
It has. I think it's a really good way to put it. It lowers barriers to entry. And that's the biggest thing for me. I've seen, the 4-year degree syndrome happen. We've seen the idea being, well, I'm not a math genius, or I'm not a programmer, so I can't get into IT. There's all these different, you can call them gates, you can call them barriers that people unwittingly or sometimes wittingly put up. Certification is great because what it does is it allows people to, I call it, they can prove their progress. I call certification and this type of training indicators of achievement. In cybersecurity, there's a term called indicator of compromise that's used, or even indicator of attack. Taking a look at it when people are learning, they really need to find confidence and to get these kind of indicators of achievement going. And I think back in the day, maybe a degree was that, kind of gold standard of indicator achievement. But I think now what we have are more sophisticated approaches and more nimble approaches. While it does take time to create a high stakes certification that has been vetted by thousands of IT professionals, that's what CompTIA does. It takes a lot less time than you'd think, and it allows the industry to pivot better when it comes to saying, here's what's important to get your unique skill set, here's what's unimportant. And this helps organizations, frankly, be more competitive, to kind of what we were talking about earlier. It allows organizations to address a larger, I would say, employment surface. In the cybersecurity industry, they'll use the term attack surface. I kind of like to look at it as the overall employment surface that we have. And it's a really big deal for us to, widen the aperture, as it were, or to look in more areas for people who are absolutely ideal to enter into IT, but just never quite realized it. So it's neat to see the industry realize, wow, there are so many, there's so many spectrums of people that we can look at.
And I must admit, I am old enough to see everything comes in cycles, and we are seeing the welcome return of apprenticeships in tech and in business in general. And according to a recent guide from the National Apprenticeship Service, I think 69% of employers say that employing apprentices improves staff retention. So can you tell me a little bit more about that, the structural benefits of apprenticeships versus maybe that traditional educational pathway in tech?
In some ways, the traditional education pathway just kind of has people kind of put their chips down, as it were, and say, I'm going to learn this topic, but with no real feedback from people who are working in the industry. And the creative folks that do mentoring, the creative folks that do apprenticeships, and this is so strong, much stronger in Europe and the UK than it is in the United States. For example, stronger in Australia than the United States. It allows people to realize, I get touchstones along the way and true feedback. And it's that feedback loop that's so important when it comes to learning. And that's one of the things that apprenticeship does. It also wakes up organizations, large and small, to realize, wow, we can kind of grow our own and kind of mentor them and shape them the way that we need. It's a win-win for everyone.
You guys are a recognised authority in things like security analytics and penetration testing, and I'd love to find out a little more about some of the trends that you're seeing, because you've got the ear of customers all around the world. So are there any emerging trends that any business leader listening should be aware of, and how can they better maybe prepare themselves against these future security threats?
I think a lot of increasing regulation, for example, worldwide, right? Also, we could talk about in the U.S. with the SEC saying, hey, if people at the C-level, if they're involved in IT and security, need to prove their skills, so there's that. We're also seeing a lot of interest, and this is shown in our CompTIA 2024 cybersecurity report. You can Google this. Incident response is a major, big deal. Let's put it that way. Security analytics continues to be an increasingly important concept because it helps you know the unknown. And I realize, that's impossible, but it allows you to kind of get ahead of the curve a bit when it comes to things like zero-day attacks, et cetera. For too long, we've relied on perimeter-based approaches. For too long, we've relied on signature-based approaches. Security analytics really makes it possible for people to kind of get out there, do a bit of threat hunting, and understand kind of what's coming at you. I think another thing that I'm seeing out in the industry is an awareness that there are root causes out there that have been causing a lot of our cybersecurity problems for some time. And I'm talking about specific root causes out there. For example, shadow IT is a concept where nowadays with the availability of the cloud, it's much easier for a department or for someone to source a solution outside of the purview of the IT department. That can be a problem. I call that shadow IT because it's IT, it's a solution, it's in the company, but nobody knows about it. And that could be a way hackers come in. Besides technical debt, there's also technical debt, which is basically, I think most people would know that when you do a solution, when you create a solution for a business, there's always a certain amount of magic you do. You call it magic, you can call it a little bit of shortcuts, a little bit of decisions that you have to make in terms of time. This creates technical debt. I think we also have decisions that were made 5 years ago, or code that was created some time ago that kind of builds up cruft. That's a kind of an industry term. Stuff left over. We have to deal with this. Okay, I call all of these things kind of under a term called cowboy IT. I like to watch Westerns, and I'm using cowboy IT as a bad term actually, because you can't shoot from the hip anymore with the increase of regulation, with the increase of the stakes that are involved. You have to have a process maturity perspective. So there are some trends that I've been noticing, and we've been noticing CompTIA for our research.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned regulation. Now here in the UK and the EU, there's GDPR, but also being combined with that is NIS2 that's coming out, I think, exactly 1 year from now. And a lot of businesses, I think, are blissfully unaware, but that needs to be in place in under 12 months. Is this making the C-suite wake up to it, do you think?
It is. And the C-suite and also business owners. And so small, medium business, they also are affected by it. But yeah, they're seeing it. And that's what we're seeing in our communities, for example. We have communities throughout, in UK and Europe, in Australia, where I'm going. In fact, they're having a meeting the week after I leave. I think they waited until I left to have the meeting. But we're all seeing the rise of this kind of regulation, whether it be NIS2 in Europe or elsewhere. And it is making folks very much wake up. That's why we're seeing more representation of IT throughout the company in the boardroom, for example. That's become very important.
And I also know that the open source community is something that's very close to your heart. So how do you see open source as a strategic advantage, or maybe even a potential risk in today's enterprise landscape? Where do you fall there?
It's a good question. I still find that the old saying, right, given enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. I think that was Torvald said that. But the open source idea, I think, is still a great way to develop code. The thing that we all have to realize is that there's no one better way necessarily. And let's put it this way, there's nothing that is foolproof. And so that's why I think things that like security analytics, also much more process-based, communications-based approach to IT is very important to catch some of these issues. We did a survey of about 500 C-level, management level folks, and we asked them, questions like, what one thing will help you mature your processes? And they all talked about the importance of communication, the importance of understanding what it means to map business to technology, but they also talked about the importance of really of not just using new technologies such as AI or whatever, but kind of clearing the ground a bit and kind of taking a step back and saying, what process do we really need to put in place so that we can move forward with confidence? And that, I think, is something that's going to help anybody, whether it be with regulations like NIS2, GDPR, what have you, to move forward better.
And of course, you've consulted with organizations around the world, including Japan, the US, and Europe. So are there any unique regional approaches to cybersecurity and training that might have caught your attention, and areas that might be doing it better than others? And what makes these markets different, especially when learning from each other too?
Anything data-driven is interesting to me, and anything that leverages, how should I put this, a particular culture interests me. For example, in Japan, I was talking to, I think it was NTT East, and I guess as kids, a certain generation, going back probably into the 90s, 80s, used to be drilled. Whenever they'd go into school, they'd get 3-minute drills. That's what they called them. So if we were learning about a topic, about IT or about history, there'd be a 3-minute drill every morning. Well, this person said, you know what? They're used to these 3-minute drills, even though they're now in their 20s and 30s. I'm going to do 3-minute drills for my cybersecurity workers. And then he took the data from that. So he all went into an LMS, and he was able to identify how people learned and what was going on. To me, the combination of kind of something that would be old school, but also taking it data driven is exciting. I've seen the Cyber Ready program, Zayshan Sitar here at CompTIA put together. It started with a conversation with the UK government. and it's now turned into a multiple award-winning program. It's up out of Bradford, and it's really neat to see how he crunches the data that comes in. For example, with these cohorts that he puts in every year, he has basically found that even though the IT industry has, let's say, about a 17% average in the UK workforce for women, he's able to put together a cohorts that had 35% females, for example, 40% ethnic minorities, and people completing cyber ready. And it's been really neat to see that. It's one reason why he's won a couple of awards. I think one was computer, CR Magazine got an award back in 22. The SC Awards did that. And he was also won an award this year as well. So it's really exciting to see programs like that do so well, because they tie into the local, but they also have, regional and even global concerns, and they're tied to education programs that have been vetted, not just by, a few dozen people or a few hundred people, but by thousands of working IT pros. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, incredibly cool. And speaking of cool, you're also the chair of the C3, a consortium of leading cybersecurity certifications. I've got to ask, how do you navigate the complexities and indeed the synergies between different certifying bodies? And what kind of value does that consortium bring to the industry and indeed any business leaders or people wanting to study?
It's a great question, man. The C3 is really cool because it includes organizations such as, organizations such as SANS-GIAC, ISACA, ISC2, CompTIA, FITSI, Cert Nexus. It's really neat to see these co-opetition people get together, because we all share a passion in helping people upskill. And so there's it's really fun to see what's going on. And while we all have different business models, different approaches, and all that, it's really neat to work with John Brandt over at ISACA, or with Brian Carrillo over at SANS-GIAC, because we basically work with a lot of governments. For example, in the United States, we're working with the Department of Defense in their, it's called their 8140 program. It used to be something called 8570. Won't go into details, but now it's called 8140. And it involves ways that we're upskilling DoD contractors and DoD people in the U.S., whether they be Marines or Army, but also with ENISA in Europe. I just got back with a couple of people there at ISACA and ISC2 and GIAC, helping ENISA put together their ECSF, their standard for upskilling through Europe. So it's really neat to navigate everybody's intrigues and interests and all that, but also to see the common ground that we all have. And that's really influencing organizations, governments, corporates worldwide to focus on standards-based, outcome-based education.
And of course, 2024 is literally just around the corner, which means it's almost compulsory to ask you to look in my virtual crystal ball and look into the future. So how do you envision the future of workforce development in the tech industry, especially in the face of rapid technological advancements and the ongoing challenges posed by remote or hybrid work environments? There's so much going on right now. I've had a great quote a few years ago that the speed of technological change is racing ahead at breakneck speed, but the reality is it's never going to move this slow again. So what do you see for the future?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Things are going to go faster. And the thing is, what I envision in the future is that people are going to need a strong technical foundation in what they do. And that means different things to different people. But I'll say this: digital fluency, first of all, not just literacy, but fluency. We need to get a larger swath of people truly digitally fluent in what they do. That's why, for example, we've worked with, we just purchased an organization in the United States called Test Out. We're all CompTIA employees now, and they excel in that kind of upskilling. And so we're doing that. The other thing I'm noticing is we have to go back to the future. Everybody wants to talk about AI, usually generative AI. I'm kind of more of a predictive AI person, I suppose. But I'll say this: if we're going to work with our AI coworkers, for example, and so much automation is in fact eliminating tasks that were absolutely bread and butter 5 years ago. This means a couple of things. First of all, we have to go back to the future and go back to Socrates, or as I say, Socrates.
Bill and Ted, love it.
There you go. and just to make it short, Socrates came up with a dialogue, a method of talking between two people, or I'll say two entities. It's called the Socratic method, the Socratic dialogue. And the more that we don't go to AI as some sort of oracle of wisdom and, oh yeah, well, AI says so, that must be right. And we more, and I'll say this, kind of cooperate with the inevitable and realize that AI will do the repetitive tasks and maybe 80% of what we do. Now we can focus on engaging in a dialogue to see if the AI is correct. This means that we have to have two really smart people, the AI and us, in that conversation. So we have to do a lot of evaluation. So go back to the future and think about Socrates, and I'll use another, and that dialogue. It's very important. The other thing, you ever heard of John Henry? He was an American, kind of in American mythology, although I think he was a real person. The story was that he got in a contest with a steam drill, drilling a hole through a tunnel, right? And he won. He beat the steam drill, but he actually lost because he died at the end of it, because the steam drill, was in effect more powerful. If John Henry had thought of this, did you know that to this day, when an automatic drill goes down and drills in the North Sea for oil or what have you, they still need a human being to apply lateral movement to that drill to shake loose the tailings from the drill. Otherwise, the drill gets bound, right? Okay. This lateral thought. Now think of this. So let the machine, if John Henry could have done this, let the machine excel at what it does and let human beings excel at what they do. Lateral thought, thinking, interpreting things and thinking more creatively. Think of this. We can use our AI to do a lot of these repetitive tasks and allow us to focus on our unique value. And I think that's inevitably what we need to do. So a strong foundation, working with AI as a coworker and negotiating rather than just accepting statements, I think are really important things. And the other ongoing challenges, learning needs to be more micro and it needs to be more contextual. And by contextual, I mean, instead of going off to a week for learning or whatever like that, which can work in many cases, maybe learning needs to be on the job and tracked on the job more creatively. So I'll say those things.
Whoa. Roads, where we're going, we don't need roads.
We don't need roads.
You set me up for two movie references there.
1.21 gigawatts, Marty. But, it's interesting because those roads are being paved, right? And there's no need for us to repave them. We need to go down those roads and accept the adventure, right? Bill and Ted's adventure, let's say. But we need to accept the adventure, which is be a little scary at times, I think. But I think if we focus on what unique value we can offer into a situation, that's the key. It reminds me of a guy named Chris Cochran. He works for an organization called Huntress Labs, and a lady named Kat Self, who works for MITRE. They basically said this: look, automation and AI allows us to focus on interesting stuff rather than the boring, repetitive stuff. And I think that's important.
100% with you on that. And of course, more than most, the pressure on almost every single one of us to be in a state of continuous learning. So I've got to ask, where or how do you self-educate?
I'm lucky enough to do self-education because I talk to so many cool people. Every day I'll be in Australia doing talking to CIOs and CISOs. So when it comes to self-education, there are a couple of things that I do. I really am lucky because I do these CIO roundtables, and I've been able to talk to people from Coca-Cola, Nissan, Tesco, just organizations everywhere. So that has really helped me. When it comes to self-education, it's all about finding areas where you experience serious discomfort. Like I'm not comfortable in that area. And I'm a firm believer that if you really work and ponder on those things and really engage in peer-based education, those weaknesses become strengths.
Love that. And I understand that straight after this podcast, you're leaving me to fly to Australia. And no doubt you've got a big pair of noise-cancelling earphones and a playlist to accompany you on that journey. So I've got to ask, We have a Spotify playlist here. I always ask my guests to add a song to. Is there anything you'd like to add to that Spotify playlist?
It's probably a bit longer than most people are used to, but there's, I think, one of the great performances from that would be May 8th, 1977. That's the Grateful Dead's Barton Hall, performance of what they now call Scarlet Fire. It's 2 songs, Scarlet Begonias, Fire on the Mountain, and they merge together in wonderful ways. The way that the Dead kind of get into this repetition, and yet it's so creative at the same time, and the way they merge them together. It's more than a jam band moment. It's more than a psychedelic moment. I think it's incredible virtuosity, but also incredible continuity. And it's like what Bill Graham, who was the promoter for a lot of rock and roll back in the 70s, 80s, and he said, the Grateful Dead aren't the best at what they do. They're the only ones that do what they do. So Scarlet Fire from 5/8/77. I highly recommend it.
Oh, man, you got me sold on that. I'll be adding that straight away and checking that out in a few moments. And, of course, for anyone listening just wanting to find out more information about anything we discussed today, maybe want to explore it in a bit more detail, maybe even ask your team a question or two, where would you like to point everyone listening?
CompTIA.org. Go check that out. Also, check out the CompTIA 2024 Cybersecurity Report. We've got it out there now. We also have the State of the Industry reports. We have the current one out now. New one's going to be coming out very shortly. And I would highly recommend you go check these resources out, because you can even go back in time. You can go back to 2022 and see where the trends are going. And also, I would check out the CompTIA roadmap. We have a fantastic, kind of career roadmap that you could put together. And what's so cool about the roadmap is that I've just noticed, whether it be worker bees such as myself or C-level folks, they really need pathways. It's so funny to see people who've been in the industry for so long, they still kind of wonder, where do I go next? And that's why pathways are so important. So you can go check out the CompTIA infrastructure pathway, the cybersecurity pathway, our new data pathway. All of these things I highly recommend. They're available in one way or the other at CompTIA.org.
Well, I'll get those links added to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. And covered so much in a small amount of time today, from different vantage point on that cybersecurity skills gap, its impact on businesses and what needs to be done to address it, but even having time to have a little bit of fun. Not one, but 2 movie references and a Grateful Dead track too. So just thank you for sharing that with me. Real pleasure today.
It's been great. Thank you so much, man. I sure appreciate it.
I think whether you are an employer grappling with the cybersecurity skills gap or an individual looking to break into the tech industry, I hope that today's discussion offered a multitude of perspectives to consider. And the role of certifications and apprenticeships as both indicators of achievements and tools for workforce stability were particularly enlightening. Moreover, the importance of marrying business and technology through effective communication and data-driven approaches cannot be overstated. And as we continue to navigate this increasingly digital world, I think the need for strong technical foundations and a keen understanding of the human-machine collaboration, I think that becomes more imperative. So a big thank you to James for sharing his expertise with us today. And remember, if you're interested in upskilling or just wanted to stay updated on the latest trends in tech, make sure you check out CompTIA's wealth of resources and certifications. And if you've got anything that you'd like to share with me, whether you're outside the tech industry wanting to pursue a career in tech, or an employer or somebody in IT that's just looking to upskill, I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we talked about today and any tips and tricks that you might be able to share. And you can do that by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk if you want to work with me. Or you can catch me on any social channel. Just look for @NeilC.Hughes and send me a quick DM. But that's it for today. So a huge thank you for listening. A big thank you to James for joining us on the podcast. And until next time, don't be a stranger.